Thanks for joining us on the John Mendola Show. We are driven by McCarthy Tire and Automotive Centers. Well, let's talk with one of the guys who's been around this area for a long time. He's headed to Pittsburgh right now, Jonathan Bombulie. And Jonathan, you're a sports writer at the Citizens Voice, now going to be working with the Pittsburgh Tribune-Review. And the big story breaks here in northeastern Pennsylvania. And now it's affecting New Jersey and Pittsburgh. People talking about it all over the country. John Hynes will be the new coach in the New Jersey Devils. And although you probably didn't get the credit for it nationally, it seemed like you were one of the guys that pretty much were there to break the story.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. In today's day and age, you're talking about a matter of minutes, measured on Twitter a lot of the time, who had it first, who had it second. But I felt like, even though I'm sort of like between newspapers right now, I felt like it was like my responsibility to keep track of this story, just because I'd covered John Hynes from his very beginnings as a pro, his first season as an assistant under Todd Richards back in '09. So I felt like it was, I don't know, like I had some sort of obligation to stay on this story, even though I wasn't technically working for any newspaper at the particular time that it broke. A very strange situation.
Well, when you're in the media business like you're always on top of things, and you have been over the years, Jonathan. And tell us a little bit about your experience here in northeastern Pennsylvania. You're a Pittsburgh guy, married, met your wife here in northeastern Pennsylvania. She's a Northeast PA girl, and the two of you kind of get involved in the newspaper business for a long time, and you guys have quote-unquote had a nice marriage in the business.
We sure have. It's funny. I went to Penn State, and some friends of mine, worked at The Voice, and they were moving on, and they called me and said, "Hey, there's an opening here." And so I applied for it, and knowing that there would be a hockey team, but not knowing it would be a Penguins affiliate. And that was way back in 1997. And 99, the team started, and yeah, like you say, all of a sudden you have a wife and a mortgage and a life, and it sort of creeps up on you. And so I was, in Wilkes-Barre pretty much as long as I was in the Pittsburgh area, about 17 years. And people compare it to like graduating from school, but nobody goes to the same school for 17 whole years. So it's even more than that. It's a bittersweet kind of thing. But it's also just a great opportunity. I mean, it's a big market, and it's a high profile NHL team that lots of people care about. And it's the paper I grew up reading, so it's, in a lot of ways, it's a dream job for me. I'm pretty psyched about it. And
you're not much different than an AHL guy getting the call up to the NHL. As you said, it's a dream job. Whether you're in the radio business, TV business, the newspaper business, you get the call up to a big city. That's a major move, and you're going to a pretty major market.
It's pretty funny. It's like I've written about guys getting called up for so long, and the things that you don't. I mean, there are things that you do realize, and then there are things that you sort of learn when you're put in a similar situation. Obviously, it's not the exact same situation. I mean, they're, elite athletes making lots and lots of money, but, things like selling your house and moving your family, and these are things that players go through, when they're traded or when they sign somewhere else in free agency. But as a reporter, you don't really give it much thought. I tell you what, if a guy has a bad first month after he gets traded, at some point I'm going to have more sympathy for him, because now I know all the sort of hoops you got to jump through. And I mean, I was out staining my deck the other day. If I had to play a hockey game the next morning, I think I would have played very poorly.
Well, Jonathan, you've worked with some nice people over the years, and now you're going to work with a whole different group. And, it's work with a bunch of professionals in the business. But to see what the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins have done, made an impact not only here in northeastern Pennsylvania, but the AHL, but I would think that there's no other system that has produced now 5 head coaches from the AHL up to the NHL. It seems it's got to be a record.
It's really amazing if you think about it. I mean, that's 1/6 of all the coaches in the NHL came through Wilkes-Barre. That it's an amazing number. Everybody knows the players, and a lot of players move on to other organizations too. Like none of those coaches that we mentioned did it in Pittsburgh. None of them are currently in Pittsburgh. So to me, that means something too, is that the guys that are getting developed here, they're not just getting developed for one team. They're getting developed for, 29 others too. And I'll tell you what, that trend of the coaches moving on to the NHL, that makes the job that the Penguins have of replacing John Hynes, which won't be easy, but that makes it easier because that track record makes this job so attractive. I mean, the best and brightest, coaches who would consider an AHL head coaching position a step up are going to be applying for this job just because of A, the track record, B, the facilities. I mean, like that Cole Street facility is for AHL standards is like really top of the line. The arena's still holding up nicely, and the staff has a great reputation of treating players and coaches well. So, people are going to literally be lining up to try to get that job.
Well, Jonathan, over those 17 years or what have you, honing your skill with hockey here in the American Hockey League, I'd like to get a little perspective on a few of the coaches that have gone through here and maybe, some of the memories with players. I know you have a bunch of those, but let's first talk about John Hynes, your impressions of him over the years, the type of guy he is, and listen to his interview today with the Devils. He's a lot about personality. He's a lot about the right fit. He's a lot about knowing what makes a guy tick off the ice to make sure he ticks on the ice properly.
Yeah, he has here's one of the things that I think is one of his greatest attributes is that he is demanding and tough, but players don't dislike playing for him. That is a really tough act to pull off. Like you talk about other former coaches. Michel Therrien was demanding, an excellent coach, coaching the Montreal Canadiens right now, and rightfully so. But players did not like playing for him, just because of his, like I said, he was so demanding and he wasn't averse to, hurting people's feelings. So Hynes somehow pulls off that trick where he's tough, but people still like playing for him. I think a lot of that has to do with they buy into his system. I mean, the fact that this team, he's coached 5 years, and 4 of those 5 years they had the best defense in the league. 2 of those 5 years they went to the conference finals. All 5 years they won 40 games, made the playoffs, and won at least one round. So when you got that kind of track record, guys are going to buy into it. And Ray Shero even said that, at the press conference after Hynes was hired. He said, if you can get the respect of the players, all they want to know is why. They want to know why we're playing this system. Why should are we doing this drill? And if you tell them why and they see results, they'll get respect. And to me, that's Hynes. Hynes, one of his greatest strengths is that he has the respect of the room.
Going down the line, you mentioned a little bit about Michel Therrien. Todd Richards, he kind of just had some bad luck, I think, with the whole situation, the way things out. I mean, hey, he's with Columbus. He's done a nice job. He keeps plugging away. But as far as the Pittsburgh Penguins organization, just the timing of things didn't work out for him.
Yeah, and he took a little bit of a different route. He left Wilkes-Barre and went as an assistant briefly in San Jose for a year. And the idea was he needed to, each of these coaches sort of has their own path. And what Todd Richards needed, he was a good coach. I mean, he had a great track record in the minors, but his NHL experience was very limited as a player, none as a coach, and very few games as a player. So what he needed on his resume was NHL experience. So when he had the opportunity to join Todd McClellan's staff in San Jose, he took it. And then that helped him get the Minnesota Wild job, which looked like a dream job because it was his home state and everything like that. And it didn't work out. But the like you mentioned, when he moved on to Columbus, it turned out to be a great fit. I mean, that Columbus team, they had 1 million injuries this year, so they didn't make the playoffs. But the year before that, they showed a lot of improvement. And they play all of these guys that we're going to talk about, these coaches, they come from the same tree. It's the Ray Shero tree, and they all believe in playing the game fast. And that doesn't necessarily mean the fastest skaters, although that helps. It means making decisions fast and forcing opponents to make decisions faster than they want to. And that sort of has been the hallmark of all these coaches, that come from the Ray Shero coaching tree, if you will.
We're talking with Jonathan Bombulie here on the John Mendola Show. We are driven by McCarthy Tire and Automotive Centers. He was working for the Citizens Voice in northeastern Pennsylvania, now going to be with the Pittsburgh Tribune-Review, covering the Pittsburgh Penguins. That is, when we get over to Mike Yeo, he's a guy that kind of has endured some streaks. I think it was last year he had the streak in the middle of the year. It was pretty darn good. Then towards the end of the year, they went bad. And then this year, I think they got hot towards the end. It was Mike Yeo style. He was the youngest coach in the NHL, now replaced by John Hynes as far as the youth movement there.
Yeah, and it was an interesting season for them. There were times in the middle of the season where I think he was on the hot seat a little bit, Mike Gill was. But then they got a goalie, Devin Dubnyk. They made a trade, and he's a guy who played in Wilkes-Barre in 06, 07, just briefly. It was his rookie year, so he was in the East Coast League most of the year. But he came up and played 4 games, and so, I'm sort of familiar with his game. But he went to Minnesota and played awesome. And it goes to show you what a good goalie will make a coach look great. But the Mike Yeo path is a very interesting path, because what he did was, he was attached to Mike Therrien. So he coached with him here in Wilkes-Barre, then moved up to Pittsburgh with him. And then after he did that, he had his NHL experience. But what was missing on his resume was head coaching experience. He never had any. So he went back to the AHL, to the Houston Aeros, and then got the job in Minnesota that he has now. So again, it's sort of like the inverse of Todd Richards. He needed the head coaching experience, and he got it. And I'll tell you something else. I think there's a very good chance Alain Nasreddine follows the Mike Yeo coaching path, where he stays with John Hynes, goes to New Jersey with him, and then later on down the road looks for head coaching experience. I think that's it's a really good formula for having a good long coaching career.
Well, it's nice to see these guys going through the system, and then, hey, maybe 3, 4, 5 years go by pretty quickly. They be an assistant. Automatically, you may make it in the NHL like he will. Dan Bylsma, I mean, you're making some money not working for a year, and it's nice to think, a guy like you or me saying, hey, I'd hang out in Hawaii, I'd do this, I'd do that, but eventually this coaching thing just eats at you, and eventually somebody just keeps knocking on your door. We're going to give you more money. We're going to do this, and of course, the Buffalo Sabres said, hey, Dan, we'd love to have you.
Yeah, and I don't think he would have taken just any old job. Like you said, I mean, he had the paycheck to fall back on. I mean, the Buffalo job is kind of a sneaky, really attractive job for 2 reasons. First of all, they got the number 2 pick, so they're going to get Jack Eichel from BU, who is not Connor McDavid, super prospect, but, pretty close. One of the better prospects to come out in, say, the last 5 years. So that's a good building block. And the other thing is Terry Pegula as the owner. I can't imagine any coach who wouldn't want to work for him. I mean, that's a guy who is, by all accounts, just super independently wealthy and loves hockey. I mean, if that's not the kind of boss you want to have when you're a hockey coach, I don't know. I don't know what would be better. Terry Pegula is a hero of mine. That guy, he played it right, man.
Jonathan, there's been so many memories, I'm sure, for you over the years. You may have a favorite player. We could go back and name a few, Milan Kraft or Robert Demi, everybody knows Bomby's story, or Andy Chiodo. Tell us about some of the fun or interesting stories or players that you covered over the years with the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins that stick out.
Yeah, there's no doubt Dennis Bomby is at the top of the list. I mean, he's a guy who, when I was just learning how to do this in '99, he sort of, he told me the truth, and that helped a lot. I learned a lot about the pro game from him. He's definitely, top-notch, top of the line. And I'll tell you what, at some point down the road, I don't know if it would be now or later, but I think he'd make for an excellent assistant coach in Wilkes-Barre, something like that. He's got a job now. I'm not trying to force him out of Chicago where he's a scout, but, that might be a good thing for him. And, when people ask me about the most memorable games that I covered, I always say this, and fans don't like this because it's a loss. But it was in the 06 playoffs, and it was a game where in the third period in Philadelphia, the Penguins were up 5-1, and they gave up 6 straight goals and lost 7-5.
I remember that.
And it was the most amazing thing I have ever seen. And just in terms of telling a story, walking into that locker room and seeing Andy Chiodo and Alain Nasreddine and Rob Scuderi, I'd never seen a look on athletes' faces like that before. It was one of the most amazing things I'd ever seen. So that's a game that really sticks out as far as being memorable. But, you got the cup runs to the finals in 01, 04, and 08. And, you know, being in Milwaukee and being in St. John, New Brunswick and Chicago, these are places, you know, that you might not have gone. Just a lot of great memories.
Well, things may change from you. You may go from, having a coffee at Jimmy's Coffee Shop to, Mr. Starbucks or something and traveling a little bit more prestigiously. Tell us about what you're expecting with the NHL schedule and travel-wise.
Yeah, there's two of us, myself and Jason Mackey. We will split the beat. So, we'll both take half the trips and that sort of thing. So, yeah, I won't. Instead of covering games at the Brim County Veterans Memorial Arena, I'll be at Madison Square Garden. So that's definitely going to be a little bit of an adjustment. But I mean, you know, I'm really looking forward to it. I mean, there's just, you know, a lot of places I've never been. Like, for instance, the NHL All-Star Games in Nashville this year. I think that would be such a great time. I mean, I've never been to Nashville. I think it would be a great place for a showcase event like that. I don't know if I'll get that assignment, but I guess I'm lobbying for it here publicly. But, yeah, just a lot of cool new places. And you know what? When you talk about traveling places, another memory over the years is getting to go to St. John's, Newfoundland, which is just an amazing place, an island out in the middle of the Atlantic, basically. And the Penguins played there in the playoffs 2 straight years. That's a town that, you know, you'd never get to otherwise. So, yeah, I mean, it's been a rewarding kind of thing, and it's going to be rewarding in a different way going forward.
Jonathan, some favorite memories, the people you work with, maybe a favorite restaurant or two, or some things here in northeastern Pennsylvania that you couldn't get anywhere else?
Well, I'll tell you what, there's 2 sides to that. Because one thing I'm looking forward to about getting back to Pittsburgh is fish sandwiches. Pittsburgh specializes in fish sandwiches, and you can't get a decent fish sandwich in northeastern Pennsylvania. But I will tell you, I like Tony's Pizza up here in Mountaintop. I'm going to miss those guys. Guame Chinese in South Wilkes-Barre, man, I love those guys. When you talk about guys I worked with, you know, we were really, really lucky that we had Steve Bennett and Jill Snowden and myself, and then my wife and the current sports editor, Jim Reeser, and the previous sports editor, Neil Corbett. We were all together for like a decade, which is so rare in this business, you know, in any kind of media, really, to have that kind of continuity. And, you know, we just became great friends, and it's, that's part of the bittersweet part of it is, you know, moving 300 miles away from those guys.
Well, it'll be tough to fill your role, and you mentioned the nice team you had there at the Citizens Voice, and as you mentioned, together for a long time, rare in the business, no doubt about it. Well, Jonathan, it's been great checking in with you. Love to check in with you in the future when you're covering the Pittsburgh Penguins. Great job. What a success story that you've done professionally, and of course, we wish you and your wife, Nancy, the best there in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, thanks. You got my number. If there's any Wilkes-Barre-related guys that get called up and you want to talk about them, just give me a call.
All right, we appreciate your time. That is Jonathan Bombulie. He is now with the Pittsburgh Tribune-Review here on the John Mendola Show. We are driven by McCarthy Tire and Automotive Centers.